You remember the silence after our great victory. It was not the quiet of peace. It was the hush of a graveyard we had created. We stood on the bridge of our flagship, the Unbroken, and watched a star die. Their star. We had fired the weapon that ended a civilization. 1,000 worlds fell quiet in a single, terrible moment. We had won the war. We had secured our borders and our future. But the cost was a hole in the night sky, an emptiness that echoed in our souls. The cheers of our people back home sounded hollow. They rang false across the void. We knew what we had done. There was no parade for us when we returned. There were only downcast eyes and whispered words. Our victory was a monument to our fear. We had feared their power, their strange and silent ways. We chose to strike first with overwhelming force. We chose annihilation over understanding. And in the silence, we heard our own damnation. It was the sound of 1 billion lives extinguished. It was the sound of our own humanity cracking. We looked at our hands, the hands that pushed the buttons. They felt alien. They felt monstrous. This was our legacy. Our species inherited a profound and deserved guilt. We became the ghosts of the galaxy. The story of the silent ones was taught in every classroom. We made our children look at the dark patch of sky. They learned the name of the star we had murdered. We made them learn the price of our terrible arrogance. Our art and our music became somber things. They were filled with sorrow and a deep longing. We built memorials not to our dead, but to theirs. We wrote their names in light on endless black walls. We tried to remember the faces we had never even seen. We were a people drowning in our own shame. Generations were born and died under this shadow. We never expanded further into the stars. We were too afraid of what we might find, or perhaps what might find us. We had shown the universe our teeth. Now we were terrified of the teeth it might show in return. Our great victory had imprisoned us in our own system. We told ourselves we were protecting the galaxy from ourselves. It was a noble lie that hid a simple truth. We were cowards. We had committed a great sin, and we were afraid of the judgment. Our guilt was a chain we had forged for ourselves, a chain one link for every life we had taken. Then came the architect, Alara. She was old. Her eyes held the same sorrow as everyone else. But they also held a spark, a tiny, defiant light. She proposed the unthinkable plan for atonement. It was presented to the High Council on a day of remembrance. The air was thick with ceremonial grief. She stood before us all, and she proposed a bridge. Not a metaphorical bridge, a physical one, a structure that would span the void between their dead system and ours. It would be a gesture of immense effort and sincerity. A mad, beautiful, impossible idea. She said we should build our apology. The council was stunned into silence. A bridge to a graveyard? A monument to our own crime? Many called it foolish. They said it was a waste of resources. They said the dead could not see our apology. But Alara argued it was not for the dead. It was for the living. It was for us. Her words caught fire in the public imagination. An entire species looking for a way to atone. We had poured our resources into weapons before. Now we could pour them into healing. The impossible idea began to feel like the only idea. It was a path out of the darkness we had made. We drafted the message. It was the hardest thing our people had ever written. How do you apologize for genocide? We did not ask for forgiveness. We did not deserve it. We simply explained what we were going to do. We would build a bridge to their silent home, a tribute to their memory. We attached the full schematics of the bridge. Every girder, every plate, every single rivet was detailed. It showed our commitment in the language of engineering. It was an apology cast in math and physics. We included our entire history, our art, our music, our shame. We sent it all, a message cast into the dark. Then we waited. We aimed our deep space sensors at the void. We listened for any reply, any signal at all. The only reply was the cold void itself. Weeks turned into months. Months turned into years. The silence from their direction was as profound as ever. It was an echo of the silence we had created. Some said this was proof of our folly. They argued we should abandon the project. But the silence did not deter us. It strengthened our resolve. We had spoken our piece. We had made our promise. An unanswered apology is still an apology. We would build the bridge. We would keep our word to the ghosts. We began gathering the shards of penance. The project required impossible amounts of material. The girders needed to be strong enough to defy gravity wells. They had to endure the harshness of the void for eternity. There was only one source of such refined and hardened metal: our old warships. The very fleet that had won the war. We pulled them from their orbital moors, the great destroyers and cruisers that had blackened a star. Their names were like curses on our tongues. The Unbroken, the Final Word, the Godhammer. We towed them to the great foundries in orbit around our sun. We began the holy work of deconstruction. It was a slow and deliberate process. We did not simply melt them down. We took them apart piece by piece. Every weapon system was dismantled by hand. Every missile tube was unbolted. We wanted to feel the weight of what we had done. We would build our apology from the very weapons of our sin. The metal screamed as it was torn apart. The foundries roared day and night. The light of their fires was a constant dawn. We were unmaking our past. We were forging a new future from the instruments of our fall. It felt like breaking down a prison one bar at a time. The work was hard, but our souls felt lighter with every ship that vanished. You were one of the thousands who volunteered. You left your life behind for this pilgrimage of labor. Your family had a proud military history. Your great-grandfather had served on the Unbroken. His picture was on your mantle. A constant, silent accusation. You joined the bridge builders to change that legacy. The work was a prayer hammered into metal. You swung a plasma cutter against the hull of a battleship. You guided the robotic arms that lifted city-sized chunks of armor. The noise was deafening. The heat was immense. But in the fire and the clamor, you found a strange kind of peace. You were not destroying. You were preparing to create. We lived in temporary habitats, clinging to the construction frame. The stars were our constant companions. We saw the dark patch in the sky every day. The ghost of their sun was our supervisor. It watched us work, reminding us why we were here. We made a silent vow to it each morning, a vow to build something worthy of their memory. You shared your meals with people from every nation on our world. Old rivalries were forgotten. The only thing that mattered was the work. We were not just building a bridge. We were rebuilding ourselves. We were a species learning how to hold a hammer instead of a sword. It was a clumsy, painful education. Some days the coffee was almost as bad as our collective guilt. Almost. Finally, the day came. The first piece of the bridge was ready. It was a massive anchor point, the size of a small moon. It held the primary gravitic projector. This device would bend space, forming the foundation of our path. It was the first step into the void, a promise we were about to make solid. We towed the anchor out to the edge of our system. A fleet of tugs, small, powerful civilian ships, pushed it into place. They moved with the reverence of pallbearers. We all watched on our monitors. The entire human race held its breath. The fate of our apology rested on this single maneuver. The anchor settled into its calculated position. Its internal systems hummed to life. Then, the gravitic projector fired. It did not create a beam of light. It created a ripple in space-time. A tiny, stable distortion. A single point of light appeared against the emptiness. It was a promise made solid against the black. We had done it. The first piece was in place. A wave of relief washed over us all. We had taken the first real step on the long road to atonement. The bridge was no longer a dream, it was a reality. A single, beautiful point of hope shining in the darkness we had made. We worked for 50 years after that. Section by section, the bridge grew. It stretched out from our system like a beckoning hand, a thin silver thread stitching the wound in the sky. We built listening posts and habitation modules along its length. It became a city in its own right, a city dedicated to a single, sacred purpose. And then, they appeared. We had grown used to the silence. We had accepted that we worked for ghosts. We had long given up on any response. So when our sensors screamed, we were not prepared. At the very edge of their dead system, ships had emerged. Dozens of them. They were not like our ships, all hard angles and brutal function. Theirs were graceful. They looked like spun glass or frozen light. They did not power up weapons. They did not hail us. They did not move toward us. They simply observed our work from an impossible distance. The silent watchers had finally emerged. Our blood ran cold. Fear was our first reaction, the old, familiar fear that had led us to sin in the first place. We thought they were survivors. We thought they had come for their revenge. Our defense fleet powered its shields. Our commanders sent frantic messages. But the ships just hung there, silent, motionless, judging. Their silence was 1,000 times more terrifying than any threat. We did not know what they wanted. We did not know who they were. We could not read their intentions. We could only continue our work under their gaze. Every move we made felt heavy, scrutinized. Our act of penance had gained an audience. We were no longer alone with our guilt. The work slowed. The builders were unnerved. It is one thing to build a memorial. It is another to build it while the victim's family watches from the window. Some people wanted to stop. They said we had provoked them. But Alara, now impossibly old but still with that fire in her eyes, urged us on. She said this changed nothing. Our apology was not conditional. It did not depend on their acceptance. We would finish the bridge. We would complete our vow, even if it was the last thing we ever did. So we returned to our work. Our hands trembled, but our resolve held. We hammered out our prayer under the silent watch of gods or demons. Then the universe decided to test our resolve. A deep space anomaly, a rogue magnetar, drifted near the construction path. It was a cosmic wrecking ball of immense power. Its magnetic fields began to play havoc with our systems. The bridge groaned under the strain. Warning lights flashed across 1,000 consoles. We were on the verge of losing everything. We thought it was their judgment made manifest. A silent, elegant attack using the forces of nature against us. They had not come for revenge. They had come to watch us fail. To see our grand apology torn to pieces by a careless universe. The irony was so bitter. It felt like a joke written by a cruel god. What's next? Someone muttered on the comms. A plague of space locusts? Panic began to set in. The magnetic field was shearing off support struts. The main structure was starting to buckle. We had to reinforce the bridge, but our ships could not get close. The magnetar's field fried any unshielded electronics. We were helpless. We could only watch our half-finished hope die. But then we saw it. Our long-range cameras showed our crews, bridge builders in shielded work suits. They were going out onto the bridge itself. They were tethering themselves to the structure. They were using manual tools, wrenches and rivet guns. They were fighting the storm with their bare hands. They refused to let our promise break. You were one of them. The magnetic field tugged at your suit. The metal of the bridge groaned like a dying beast beneath your boots. You could barely see through the visual static. But you worked. You tightened bolts. You welded plates. You and 1,000 others became the shield. You held the bridge together against the wrath of a star. We survived the storm. The magnetar passed. The bridge was damaged, but it held. And as the static cleared, we saw the silent watchers. They had not moved. They had not interfered. They had simply watched us. We realized then that this was not their test. It was our own. We had faced the void's indifference, and we had not backed down. Our resolve was now as strong as the metal we shaped. With the crisis averted, we reached the heart of the project. It was time to install the bridge's core. It was not a power source or a computer. It was a memory crystal. A massive, perfectly grown lattice designed to hold information. And we had filled it with our confession. Every piece of art, every song, every text about our great shame was in there. But it held more than that. We had asked every human to speak, to record a message of personal regret. 1 billion voices, 1 billion apologies. The crystal absorbed them all. It held our collective sorrow. It pulsed with a soft, internal light, a heartbeat of remorse. It was the heart of memory and sorrow. Installing it was a ceremony. We moved the core into a central chamber at the midpoint of the bridge. The chamber was open to the stars. We wanted the universe to witness this. The crystal floated in the center of the room, held by containment fields. Its light washed over us. It felt warm. It felt heavy. We activated the final recording. It was the voice of a child. She was born long after the war. She had only known the stories. She simply said, "We are sorry. We hope one day someone will listen." Her voice joined the billion others in the crystal. The light pulsed brighter. It sent a soft wave of pure emotion down the length of the bridge. A wave of profound, unending regret. Our confession was now a permanent part of the cosmos. As the crystal's pulse reached the far end of the bridge, their ships moved. It was their first movement in a century. For a terrifying moment, we thought our apology had been taken as an insult. We braced for the attack that had haunted our nightmares for generations. We watched our screens, our hands hovering over defense controls we prayed we would never use. But they did not approach with malice. Their ships flowed toward the unfinished end of our bridge. They moved with a silent, liquid grace. And they carried materials, girders and plates like we had never seen before. They were not made of metal. They looked like they were woven from solid light and captured nebula. They began to build. Their construction methods were baffling. Beams of light extended from their ships. They wove their strange, luminous materials into our structure. They were finishing the bridge from their end. They were meeting us halfway. Our brutal, heavy metalwork began to merge with their elegant, star-born architecture. We could only watch in stunned silence. This was an answer beyond our wildest hopes. They were not just accepting our apology, they were participating in it. They began weaving their own light into our structure. Two distinct styles of building, one born of guilt, the other of grace, began to intertwine. The seam was visible, a clear demarcation of where sorrow met forgiveness. The sight was breathtaking. It was the most beautiful thing humanity had ever witnessed. It was a collaboration between a murderer and a ghost. We sent our best engineers to observe. They could not understand the physics. It was more like art than engineering. They called it a joke of the highest order. The universe finally had a punchline, and it was a good one. We had spent a century building a monument to our isolation. They had turned it into a handshake. The day came when only a single section remained. The final piece of the bridge that would lock everything into place. Our section was heavy, functional steel. Theirs was a latticework of shimmering light. They were designed to connect perfectly. Two peoples would meet in the middle. We would finally be connected to the civilization we had tried to erase. The final girder was guided into place by both our machines and their light. It slid into its housing with a soft, perfect click. A tremor ran the entire length of the bridge. A wave of energy, not destructive, but resonant. The bridge was complete. Our apology now physically connected our two stars. A path of light and steel across the greatest darkness we had ever known. A message appeared on our screens. It was not words. It was an image. A map of the bridge. It showed a single figure walking from our side, and a single figure walking from theirs. It was an invitation. A meeting was about to take place. In the very center of the bridge we had built together, there was no debate about who to send. You were chosen. Your work during the Magnetar storm had become legendary. You were a builder. You were a symbol of our new way. You were not a politician or a soldier. You were someone whose hands had shaped the apology. And so, you were chosen to make the first crossing. You put on a simple environment suit. No weapons, no tools. Just you. You stepped into the airlock at the human end of the bridge. The doors hissed open. The walkway stretched out before you. A silver road hanging in the endless night. Each step you took echoed with the weight of our shared history. The first half of the walk was familiar. You walked on the metal you had helped forge. You saw the marks of your own plasma cutter. You saw the dents and scars from the Magnetar storm. It was a history of your people's journey. A journey from violent pride to humble labor. You walked past the chamber holding the crystal core. Its soft light pulsed against your visor, a silent encouragement. Then you crossed the seam. The steel under your feet gave way to the glowing alien structure. The air itself felt different here. Warmer. The light was soft and pearlescent. It felt like walking through a dream. You looked up. The stars here were not the same. You were in their territory now. You were a guest in the graveyard we had made. You kept walking, your heart a drum against your ribs. At the center of the bridge, a figure waited. It was tall and slender, wrapped in robes of what looked like liquid starlight. It had no face you could recognize, no features you could name. It simply was. You stopped a respectful distance away. You did not know what to do. You did not know what to say. So you just stood there, a lone human on a bridge between worlds. They met you not with words, but with a silent, star-born chorus. It was not a sound that entered your ears. It was a feeling that bloomed in your mind. A wave of pure, unfiltered emotion. It was not forgiveness. That was too simple a word. It was understanding. It was acceptance. It was a sad, beautiful song about loss and renewal. You felt their history. You saw the world you had burned. You saw their cities of light and crystal. You felt the love and the laughter of a billion people. And you felt their end, the wave of fire, the sudden silence. You felt their grief, a grief so vast it could swallow stars. It washed over you, through you. It should have broken you. But then, the song changed. It shifted from sorrow to something else. It was the feeling of a seed sprouting in barren ground. The feeling of the first rain after a long drought. It was the quiet joy of a thing being rebuilt. A forgiveness made of light and song. They were showing you that an end is not always the end. Tears streamed down your face, freezing into tiny crystals on your visor. You fell to your knees, not from pain, but from relief. The weight of generations lifted from your shoulders. You were no longer a child of murderers. You were a child of builders. They had accepted our apology. They had accepted us. The bridge stands today. It is a testament to our atonement. It is a shining ribbon of hope connecting two stars. It is the most famous object in the galaxy, a place of pilgrimage for 1,000 different species. They come to see what we built. They come to see what we learned. We are no longer the ghosts of the galaxy. We are the bridge builders. We trade and talk with the silent ones, though they still rarely use words. We have learned much from them. They are a people of immense grace and patience. They teach us their strange and beautiful star science. We teach them our clumsy, heartfelt art. We learned a valuable lesson from our greatest sin. The bridge is more than a structure. It is a promise to never again choose fear over understanding, a promise to always seek connection over conflict. You often return to the bridge. You walk its length, from the cold steel to the warm light. You remember the silence of victory, and you thank the stars for the dawn of the second chance. We learn to build better things than walls.